I'm going to be honest, one of the biggest mysteries, at least to me, in the entire NBA is the Boston Celtics relationship with Isaiah Thomas. It's something simply that I never really quite understood, because on one hand, this is a guy that is essentially the biggest rags to riches story, Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick in the 2011 NBA draft that built a story for himself, eventually gets acquired by the Boston Celtics in a trade and really gets to put himself on display for Beantown, puts the city on its back, and was the face of its franchise for about a year and a half to 2 years. And then he gets unceremoniously shipped off, and I understand the reasoning for that, but then afterwards, it just gets really weird, and I'm gonna tell you what I mean about that. Now, before we get to the content, just do me a favor and leave a like on this video and consider subscribing and turning on our notifications, because I'm gonna be doing my best to get you guys each and every single free agency piece that I think is at least very legitimate and worth listening to your devices. Now that we got all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? So when Isaiah Thomas got traded back in the 2017 NBA offseason, it was a trade that I really didn't fault Danny Ainge for. Sure, it was a trade that was conducted at a very rough time for Isaiah Thomas. He just played through an injury, through a very grueling playoff series, and a very emotional one at that, because his sister died in a car accident towards the beginning of that NBA playoff run. And if it were not for a man by the name of LeBron James existing in the Eastern Conference, then the Boston Celtics would have had a good chance of making it to the NBA Finals. But alas, for the greater part of the 2010s, that wasn't the case, and Isaiah Thomas wasn't so lucky, so the Boston Celtics would get eliminated. That offseason was seen as a pretty interesting one, as very rarely do you trade your franchise cornerstone after he's able to lead you to the Eastern Conference Finals, especially if you're a team that is considered to be rebuilding while also contending at the same time. But also in that offseason, a very unique opportunity presented itself. Kyrie Irving apparently wanted out of Cleveland because there was some rumor about LeBron James possibly leaving the Cavaliers again, or that's what was the rumor at the time. Other rumors suggested that Kyrie Irving just wanted to be the leader of his own team. At least that's what Kyrie wanted at the time. And eventually the Boston Celtics gave the Cleveland Cavaliers a trade package that composed of Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, Ante Zizic, and the draft pick that eventually became Colin Sexton. I like to refer to this as the worst trade of all time, because really nobody won this trade. I think everybody that was involved in this trade was significantly worse just for participating in this trade. And after waiting an extended period of time to see whether Isaiah Thomas would fit alongside LeBron James in Cleveland, it only took the Cleveland Cavaliers 15 games to realize that this was just not going to work out before the Cavaliers decided to trade Isaiah Thomas to the Los Angeles Lakers for a package surrounding Jordan Clarkson, Channing Frye, and from there it was kind of downhill from Isaiah Thomas. What was supposed to be a free agency that would see him cash in and sign a huge multi-million-dollar max deal saw him just sign a veteran minimum deal multiple times on end. And while a lot of people like blaming Danny Ainge for trading Isaiah Thomas after being the hero that the Boston Celtics rightfully needed, I like to place a decent amount of the blame on Isaiah Thomas himself. In this scenario, the best move probably would have been to just sit down and not even to play a single game until his injury concerns were fully alleviated, or until he looked like his former self at all whatsoever. But rushing back from injury and then getting traded mid-season just made him seem like damaged goods, and I think ultimately costed him millions of dollars. But I'll tell you what was even weirder about this. The fact that the Boston Celtics could have reacquired Isaiah Thomas for pennies on the dollar, literally signing him to a veteran minimum. And by the way, Isaiah Thomas said multiple times that he wanted to return to Boston, and there were times where Boston could have used a scoring guard like Isaiah Thomas, but the Celtics didn't even make an attempt. It was almost as if Danny Ainge had some sort of vendetta against Isaiah Thomas. Like, I did this horrible thing to you. I shipped you off to Cleveland. I put you in a very bad situation for your career. I executed this trade for Kyrie Irving, which, by the way, Kyrie Irving ended up backstabbing the Boston Celtics as well. And that's your fault. I don't want you to be a Celtic anymore. I just never quite understood it, because if it were up to me and I traded Isaiah Thomas for Kyrie Irving, I would just sign Isaiah Thomas again if he was a free agent, just as like the ultimate middle finger to the original team that I made the trade with. I would just think that's hysterical. I had the player that I traded you for Kyrie Irving back on my team on like the veteran minimum, backing up Kyrie Irving or backing up Kemba Walker, or even present day backing up our current starting point guard, whoever that might be. I guess Marcus Smart. I think Marcus Smart's going to start for them at point guard now. The reason I'm telling you guys all this interesting backstory is, well, this story got even more interesting. Apparently, and this is according to a very reputable source, this is like a news report that we've been waiting for quite some time. This is according to Mark Stein of the Stein Line. The Boston Celtics, as I'm told, has interest in an Isaiah Thomas reunion, which, wow, it's about time. I never understood why they weren't interested to begin with, because to be honest, I think the Boston Celtics really need Isaiah Thomas. I think they really need that nostalgia trip back to 2017 and to really get behind that star player that embraced Boston for what they were, who embraced him for what he was. What even makes this a little bit more cooler is the fact that the Boston Celtics traded for Al Horford earlier this offseason, and there's a little bit more to the story. So let me read you the entire quote of this story by Mark Stein. Boston, I'm told, has interest in an Isaiah Thomas reunion, with new Celtics president of basketball operations, Brad Stevens, knowing to be one of Isaiah Thomas's biggest fans. So this all makes sense. I don't know if this is out of pity for Isaiah Thomas from Brad Stevens, or Brad Stevens is just thinking what we're all thinking. Why on earth wouldn't you sign a player that meant so much to the city of Boston when it's not going to cost you that much money, especially when there's a glaring need at the guard position, especially if it's a guy that could bring the team all together? No one's going to be upset that you signed Isaiah Thomas. If anything, fans are going to love you for it a bit more. I felt like this was kind of like a get out of jail free card for Danny Ainge, that at the very least, yeah, I've been drafting very horribly except for Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and Marcus Smart, but here's Isaiah Thomas again on a veteran minimum, so please like me again. I don't understand why he didn't do that once before, he was ousted or, quote unquote stepped down or resigned, but we're going to look more into this as time goes on. It's definitely something worth keeping an eye on, and I really hope it happens because, man, Isaiah Thomas really deserves better than what his career was over the past couple of years. So if you're a Celtic fan, let me know what you think about all this information in the comment section down below. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.